just a aura, which I think is a important idea in general for people to think about. There's a famous Maimer Chazal, a Gemara in Bava Basra, referring to a pasuk in this week's parsha. It says in the Torah that when Klal Yisrael were taking their trip through the Midbar, they came to Cheshbon, and the Gemara says, person has to be thoughtful as to the Cheshbon. There's a world over here, there's some kind of an idea going on, and Hefsed Mitzvah Keneged Schara, Schara Avera Keneged Hefseda, and a person should take into account what's really going on in life. A person has to be responsible. So the simple understanding of that Maimer Chazal is people, they get stuck in a rut. They're doing something, and they don't take the time out to reassess if what they're doing is really relevant. It's just imagine, I was in America recently, and I was in somebody's car, and they had like thrown on the side their GPS, and the guy said to me, 10 years ago the company that made this was the company, that was the place to invest into GPS. The GPS is as interesting today as a phonograph. It just has absolutely everybody has their iPhones with Waze, so GPS is there barely hanging on. Now, if you want to be responsible in the world, you have to keep yourself what's called the head of the 8 ball. You have to know what's going to be coming, what's around the corner, in order to know what to be producing. I once read an article about the stock market, and the analyst's bottom line was, if you want to have secure long-term investments, buy nuts and bolts. They're going to be around forever. That's it. Whatever it is that you're going to be buying that's going to be a dazzling stock today, who knows where it's going to be tomorrow. Right? A person has today tape recorder. I know I wanted to have some shiurim of mine that wanted on tape. I had to go and have somebody buy for me on eBay a cassette player because it doesn't exist. Right? These are things they're just gone, and people have to be aware of that. So that's called Bo Nasa Cheshbon Shalom. People have to be aware that things change and what you're doing and maybe irrelevant, etc. That's a simple shot in the Maimer Chazal. The Mesilas Yesharim, he takes this to a new level, and he says that no, there are people that are intoxicated with the moment, and therefore they're paralyzed from making the Cheshbon Shalom. In other words, a person is having such a great time that they don't see the consequences. They're not interested in thinking about what does all this mean. I'm going to take off of school today because my friends are going to the park, and so there's a test tomorrow. They're just too busy at the moment. And there's another level of Yomru HaMoishlim, those who actually can control their desires to make a cheshbon. That's shlav number 2. Then the Mesilas Yesharim says there's shlav number 3, the third level, and this is the level which is difficult. I'm really ready to do the right thing. What is the right thing? How do I figure out what the right thing is? How do I make Cheshbon Shalom? In other words, what is necessary for the person to actually come to a proper conclusion in what the right thing or the wrong thing is? So last time we spoke about, to a certain extent, the idea that a person who has an agias, so he sees things in a funhouse mirror and he's going to have the wrong bottom line. But that's one thing. Are we really able to see what the right thing is or the wrong thing is? And this is a question which the Mesilas Yesharim, he speaks about. They already stopped and they're ready to reassess and to do the right thing. Now they want to know what is the right thing to do. And they see that there's really the right thing, but they don't know what the right thing is. So he says they're like people that are in a maze. You know, they have to get through a thing and you know which is the right way, the wrong way, and all these dead ends, etc. So even though you're intelligent and you want to do, if you don't have that overview of the world, you cannot make a right decision. When you're in that box of that labyrinth of different ways to go, so you may be very intelligent and you understand where you want to get to, but if you don't know the way, you don't have the map, you're not going to be able to do it. So how can, and I think this is a very important question, how can a person approach this issue and come to a conclusion? You could try, but there's so many things to try, you're never going to get to that, you never get anywhere. So I think the answer to this question is something very, very simple. We look today, I see it this way, at the people that are in the headlines of the newspapers differently than we looked at people in the headlines of the newspapers when I was a youngster. When I was a youngster, you figured every baseball player, was a clean cut, Erlich Agoy. I don't know if that's like a steer or not, but whatever. But Yesh Loimar, if that's what he was, and if they did anything which was improper, it was a kasha. That's what I grew up in a world like that. I say nowadays, people ask me what's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and America. So I say, I can only say the following. In America, a child who sees a policeman feels secure, and in Israel, a child who sees a policeman feels threatened. That's just the way it is. It's such a different world and environment that, and people, they say it to people in America, they say, what? I said, I don't know, I can't explain it. You know what I'm talking about? Why is that? It's so different, and it's so unnerving, right?
So the respect's gone out the window.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but no, it's, the policeman is a barbershop harab. You know, you see a policeman there, make sure you go some other way. So you don't know what he's going to do for you. You feel like he's a KGB guy that's after you. That's the way people in Israel feel towards the authorities in power. Whereas where I grew up in America, you felt security, right? Same uniform, but totally different.
You're speaking of the suburbs of Detroit, not the city of Detroit now.
Oh yeah, well, the people in the city of Detroit were guilty.
They were guilty of having a deep suntan, Rabbi.
Okay,
Which is the same problem you have here.
No, I understand. I'm saying no, but they're the policeman or whatever. Okay, but the bottom line is, in general, in America, that was the rule.
There's a racial divide in America too.
Okay, that could be. Well, that's true. I wasn't brought up in such an environment. At any rate, the bottom line is, you want to figure out what the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do is. So you have to see who is successful in life. Nowadays, when we look at the people who are in the news, we don't look at them, and I think that today it's quite clear. You may have a lot of money, you may have a lot of talent, but we see that these people's lives are in shambles. We do not, it's this idea that if I would get there, would you like to be the Prime Minister of Israel? I for sure would not want to be the Prime Minister. I would not want to be the President of the United States. And we don't see these positions, though they come with a lot of power and glory, but you know that you're going to have pot shots taken at you and they're going to try to get you into trouble. It's questionable if that's what you'd like to do. And we know that the people on top, one of the things that I grew up with was Watergate. And the Musar Haskell, which I took out of Watergate, was here you had a man who was definitely going to win the elections, but because he wanted to be so secure in his position, so he allegedly, I'm on camera, right? So he allegedly did some things which are questionable, which turned the whole world upside down, instead of just patiently waiting to let things play themselves out. Right? Again, this is issues that happen in this country with Netanyahu. These are issues that happen again and again, and people see that those people are insecure. We look at Fruma Erlicha people, and this is something which is internationally seen, people who are Erlicha people, that their lives are calmer, they live with less stress, and they are happier, by and large. No, it's people. Obviously, there's rotten apples in every bushel. I'm not right now discussing, but by and large, I think that this is something which is recognized by people who are non-biased, making an observation. So, you're stuck in this labyrinth and you have no idea what is the right thing or the wrong thing. So I can only say that I have to follow the guy who he made it through successfully. How do I know that he made it through successfully? Because you never really know in this world what's really success or not. Is he living a happy, productive life? So now when I'm going to tell you, that person is going to say, you know, I can't really tell you why. And this is something which is a mushal that I believe that all of us suffer from this idea. Is it really necessary, all those things? I was speaking to a fellow who he recruits people to go to certain yeshivas. And he said this yeshiva in particular is very good because we offer the boys all of the things that make sure they don't have to go to the street. And once you go to the street, you never know what's going to happen. So I asked the man, I just have a question for you, which I know you don't have an answer to. So I'm asking you because I want you to think about that question. I'm not disagreeing with what you're doing. I believe what you're doing is 100% right. But Shulchan Aruch says that in order to become a Ben Torah, you have to have less gashmias. You have to not sleep. You have to not eat. You have to. Shulchan Aruch, you have to a certain extent, it says you have to punish your body to make yourself more spiritual. That doesn't mean you have to fast. I'm not going to get involved with this idea. If you're going to have these people leave a gluttonous life that keeps them off the street, all you did maybe was bring the street into the Beis Medrash. How are you going to overcome? It's true you took care of the Sumeira, but the Asay Tov, to become the Ben Torah, to become the proper Jew, how are you giving that to these boys? You're taking them away from someplace to keep them there. And the man was stumped. So he said, do you have an answer? I said, I think so. But I'm not in charge. But you should at least have the question. You have to have that question. So I think the important idea, what? I have an answer for you. It's very important in your work. I have an answer to that question. But let me just finish this, and maybe afterwards I'll tell you the answer to that question. He says that the person finds himself in this labyrinth, and he says there's no way to figure it out. So the people already and the answer that he says is, you see, speak to the people who made it through. When you speak to the people who made it through, we will always say that that turn that you took is unnecessary. We will not be able to see the small things that make the difference. And that's why you have to be, I heard this from Rav Gifter once, it's a fascinating thought, and it can be used in many different things. He said, regular people are impressed by great actions. Great people are impressed with small actions. Those small differences, are what make the difference. And we'll give you an example of this in a physical pleasure and in a social pleasure. The Tainus Harayvit says that a person, forget about all these tanesim, don't do any tanesim, just no seconds of dessert. Okay? Not even no dessert. We're not even asking that of you. Just no seconds of dessert. Okay? He said, and that, when you have that urge to have that second of dessert, so that's really an urge, which is only an urge because you're already really satisfied. So it's just for pleasure by itself. If you stop there, then you have conquered your Yetzer Hara. In other words, you don't have to be a guy who's, plagued with with anorexia in order to be a God-fearing person. And I was asked by a lady once. I mean, this is the next example. I was asked by a lady once. She called me up. This lady from Lakewood, who was from a family, and she was obviously in a great turmoil and felt very depressed. She says to me, Rabbi Zachariash, why should I stop speaking Lashon Hara? I know I'm going to fall in again. It's like it's a useless battle. So I understood what I'm going to tell you. She's going to go to Gehenim. I'm going to tell her she's going to go to Mahaba. But I mean, she knows all that. I don't have to tell her that. She could teach it to me. I assume that by the fact that she's a Fruma lady, she probably has read more Lashon Hara books than I did. So she could probably give me a share on the subject. So I don't have very much to tell her. So I said, I can tell you the truth. How do you feel when you have an urge to say something and you suppress that urge because of it's a mitzvah? At that moment, boiling pivus vaso, how do you feel? So I said, you feel empowered. You feel in charge. You feel great. And when you succumb to that urge, that desire to, as my friend says, it's like the cigarette, stamp out that guy, you know, it's like rub it in, right? How do you feel? You feel horrid when you go home. It's worth it for the pleasure of the moment. The pleasure of the moment. You may fall in 20 times. That's going to happen. But that pleasure that you have when you have overcome by far outshines the mundane euphoria which evaporates rapidly. Forget about Haba. Right here in this world, those people who are able, it doesn't take so much. I'm using an example. It doesn't take, you don't have to be some kind of a guy living in some hole in the wall in order for this to happen, to be a little bit better. So this we see by the Gedolei Yisrael. This we see by our leaders. They ask of us not to go the extra bit. And you say, what's so terrible about that extra bit? The answer to the question is that it's an extra bit. It's an extra bit. And this is an important idea that we see that this idea repeating itself all the time. And I'll just use this as an example. I was once a Rebbe in a yeshiva, and the boys consider themselves B'nai Torah. And I gave them a sikha on this subject. And I said, you consider yourselves not attached to Gashmias? I challenge that each one of you have in your closet in yeshiva more shirts than your great-grandfather owned his entire life. Now you have, and I'm not talking about your good shirts that you left at home. I'm talking about in yeshiva, the amount of shirts that you have now are probably more than your great-grandfather had his entire life. Is that true? And it was obvious from their non-response that, I don't know if it was true or not, but they understood the question, that it could be. And I said, so how do you consider yourselves not indulged in Gashmis? Isn't it very simple? For where you are, where you live, what you're doing, are you doing more or less, your Gashmis, more or less than the guy next to you? In other words, if you live in a place that everybody drives a car, so driving a car became a utilitarian vehicle. You need a car. It's not a luxury item. It's necessary. Right? If you live in a place where people don't have cars and you have a car, so that same car, it represents moving a step above. So you have to know, if everybody, the lifestyle today is that everybody has 85 shirts and you also have 85 shirts, so it's not, doesn't mean that you're gluttonous, whereas 100 years ago it would have meant so. So it's a question of where the dogesh is. And this is something, I'm going to share this with you, which I call this the ultimate Al Kenyan Ramoshin Bo Cheshbon. This is an answer to you, but it's more of an answer in general also. About Victor Miller, who was from the most stark, realist, true people that I know. I've met. He was an amazing person. And he was the ultimate say it as it is guy. There's so many lines from him that go down in history. We're not going to say any of them over here because, as a friend of mine one time said, he's the only one that I know that's able to curse L'Shem Shemayim. Anyways, so his grandson one time decided he wanted to see who his grandfather really is. And there was a Seder that he had every day. And he decided he's going to hide under the table for the whole Seder and find out what really goes on when nobody's there. He said, my grandfather learned for X amount of time, and there was always some apples he used to eat, sometimes in the middle of learning, and his grandfather picked up the apple. And he's talking to himself, there's nobody there. And he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what a beautiful world. Look at the color, the firmness, the texture. You gave this all for us, that we should be able to enjoy the world and service you. He's talking to himself. And he made a bracha with an unbelievable amount of kavanah, and the grandson heard the crunch from under the table, and he almost wanted to say amen to the crunch. No, he understood that eating of the apple with all of the enjoyment was actually bringing his grandfather closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's an amazing story, right? So this is the answer is Al Kiyam but we all know that we eat in order to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Take the time out to think about where it fits into the system. When we have to be a Moishel B'Yitzram to get it to fit into the system. And we are not Moishel in our Yetzer Hara for Gashmias either. I look at people eating sometimes, and I think about it, people are so gluttonous that they give it away, the hana of eating, to be gluttonous. I'll give you an example. Big bites versus small bites. You get more pleasure in small bites than big bites, but people eat with big bites. You know why? Because they want to get it in. So they're mevater on taiva for taiva. No. This is going on, and they know it, but they can't control it. They don't make the cheshbon. They don't make the cheshbon. Watch a child licking an ice cream cone. Do you have the control to eat an ice cream cone so long? How many candies do you bite before you get to the end? You don't have to answer, I'm not interested, okay? But the idea is that the power of being a Moishel is to make the cheshbon. It doesn't pay. It doesn't pay, not here and not there. And you see this by the people who are the Moishel B'Yitzrom, that they have that control. They have that control. And when I was in yeshiva, I saw this many times. The people who were the ones who made the decisions in advance, they were the ones that lived a happier life. It's this idea of how do you actually see that? The answer is it's the small things that make the difference. What are the small things that not necessarily are we able to make that decision? You have to have somebody else make that decision for you. I'm finished. I'll just share with you a personal story that I had when I was a bocher in yeshiva. The mashkiach wanted me to come to a certain seder, and I felt that it was disrupting my limud HaTorah to go to that seder. And he told me the following story about himself. My mashkiach probably should have been Rosh Hashiva. He was an immense Talmud Chacham. He was a big Balmidas too. It's not that he didn't deserve that position, but there was just one aspect of him. He said to me, when I was a bocher in yeshiva, I had a chavrusa, and we used to learn from 12 to 3 o'clock in the morning, every night. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was so tired, I put my head down on the stender and I slept till the morning. And my chavrusa used to go back to the dormitory. So one day I asked my chavrusa, I said, why do you go back to the dormitory? You're such a big Baal Taiva, you have to sleep in a bed. Put your head down on the stender like me. And my chavrusa said to me, He said, I would do that, but I'm afraid. So I asked him, what are you afraid of? He said, if I'm going to put my head down on a stender, I'm going to get used to sleeping on a stender. And maybe in 20 years from now, when I'm going to be older, I'm going to fall asleep when I'm learning because I'm used to sleeping on a stender. But if I only sleep in a bed, then that's not going to happen. So as a mean student, I asked my mashgiach, what are you trying to say? So he said, I sometimes fall asleep at the stender. And it's probably because when I was younger, I taught myself to sleep at the stender. He made the cheshbon. Don't make the mistake. This is an amazing story. This is Moshiach talking about himself and his. Don't make the mistake, the short term versus the long term. The person has to be clear as to what the right thing to do is. I'll just mention on the subject of long term and short term, I myself had a Rosh's Drachim in my life, and I wasn't sure to make the cheshbon the short term or long term. And I went to ask Rav Shach what to do, and Rav Shach said, it's nageah for limud Torah, short term over long term. And I'd say, that's what you're talking about. And that question came up a little while later. The Rav Shach was not around the next time the question came up, and I went to ask a different Talmud Gadol and got the exact same words. So it depends what the question is, the short term versus the long term, but that's where you say these small differences.
What's an example of short term versus long term?
At that time, I had a cheshik to learn something that was in a koil, which was going to be disbanded in a short amount of time, versus a koil that was going to be around for a long time, but they weren't learning what I wanted to learn so much.
So learn what you want at the moment.
That the short term you're going to have a greater gain now, so do this, and forget about what's going to be.
So that's the rule in the Gemara, to learn what you desire to learn.
Yeah, but what's the other thing I didn't want to do? And it's also do it so it doesn't say what the cost is. But that's saying if you have all things, learn what you want to learn. But what about when you have other factors back again? So that was the kind of a question that I had, and I got to ask the same question twice to two different gedolim, and I got the same answer. So again, it's not a psak halacha l'oisa. That was in my specific situation. All right.
How do you make the cheshbon between short term and long term? When do I know that now is the time to be focused on the short term, and when is the time to focus on long term?
I think that there's 2 or 3 different factors that have to be answered. One, do you have the luxury or don't you have the luxury? You understand? That's a very important question. When do you have the luxury? When don't you have the luxury? A person's going to say that I'll worry about the long term later, and then this is the last stop till the long term. Then that's not. You have to worry about it now, right? Sometimes you have the luxury. It's not so clear what's going on. So there's so many things that can happen. I'll just give you an example. I was asked this week. There was mic was off.
Should we stop?
You can do whatever you want. Doesn't make a difference. I was asked. There's a Avrech who used to learn in my kollel many years ago. He left about 7 or 8 years ago. He's a kollel his own today, and he's in shidduchim for his kids, marrying off his first child. And the question was, he has a son who's a very good boy, and it was a shidduch which the girl didn't come from what he would say. I'm not going to involve the particulars, that background that he felt that his son needs to have a certain amount of menuchas hanefesh. This fellow himself is a menuchas hanefesh guy. He's an unbelievable. I wish I could have the placidness that this fellow has in his life. He said his son also needs to have a placid environment. And the question was that she works in a kind of a job, Shal Pi Teva Hadvarim, if they're going to have a big family. So do you go for a shidduch or you don't? Just give you a broad question. So I said, there's no problem. If that's the whole question, there's no problem. She said to me, why? So I said, very simple. There are so many factors involved in the finances and the dynamics of what's going on that a good girl by far outshines the questions. She said, well, how's it going to work out? I said, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. If it can work out for the short term, and again, I don't know what time. The long term, it's not. We know that there are many people who don't have high-paying jobs survive, right? How? Each one has a story. But you know what? All the people who have high-paying jobs, they also have stories, right? Because So the fact that the Sach HaKol at the end, there's enough wiggle room that it's not called irresponsible. Okay? So sometimes though, I'm walking into a situation and I'll get into a situation that I know I have pressing needs right now, and in order for this to work out, I have to be, a miracle has to happen, right? So then we have to worry about the long term. You know, this is a question, how much debt can you incur?
Like I was saying, when he was sleeping with the Stinda,
Yeah.
that worked out short term. He could
So-
afford it, the luxury.
Yes, and now, so I'm telling you the truth. You're asking a question. My mashgiach was speaking to me. I didn't ask him if today he thinks that he made a mistake. There are those. This is we live in a very interesting world. Probably from the most noted masmid in the yeshiva of Mir before the Second World War was Rav Scheinberg. He was an unbelievable masmid. And in Vilna, there was also a very famous masmid whose name was Michael Yudalefowitz. He was a part of Yeshiva Ketana. And both of them had an unbelievable nisayah. Should they go to the Levaya, the Chafetz Chaim, or not? Both of them, they understood to go to that Levaya is going to cost 2 or 3 days of Bittul Torah. But it's Chafetz Chaim's Levaya. And you're a masmid. Should you go or shouldn't you go? This is the question, like the guy. So both of them decided not to go. Both of them decided to go. 60 or 70 years later, they were before they were nifter, they were asked if they have charata on their decision. Do they think today that they made the right decision or the wrong decision? Rav Scheinberg said he thinks he made the wrong decision. He should have gone. And Rav Lefner said he made the right decision. Does that answer your question? Probably for Rav Scheinberg, it was the wrong decision, and for him it was the right decision. I don't think that there is one answer, because at the end of the day, we have a bitulay zeh kiyumoy. A person sometimes takes the day off. There's a fellow who I know, who works in a pekuach nefesh field, that he's a unique fellow. There is nobody who duplicates his work. And he told me, you can leave. He told me once that he's going on vacation with his wife. So as a mean rabbi, I asked him, who says you're allowed to go on vacation? Who says you're allowed to go on vacation? So he thought I was actually serious. It wasn't a joke. So he was like stammering for an answer. I said, I said you should go on vacation. So he wasn't sure which he should be relieved or confused. I said, there's an expression in English, all work and no play makes John a dull boy. If you're not going to go on vacation, you will eventually become unproductive in your field. You're forced to go on vacation, just like you're forced to eat and you're forced to sleep. So you have to go on vacation too. If you're not going to get that rejuvenation, you're going to become stale and obsolete. So your vacation is part of your work. It's not vacation. That's an aspect of the work. This is a person has to know what it is that you're doing. So sometimes bitulay zeh kiyumoy. My Rosh Yeshiva came once to yeshiva. Probably was like 5 minutes before Seder started, and I was speaking to somebody and learning outside, and we got into a heated argument. And 5 minutes into Seder, he walked outside and still was there fighting about the same thing. And he said, speaking and learning is wonderful, but learning gets you to be a Talmud Chacham. Go inside and learn. You have to know what is the right thing at the right time. So sometimes a person this is an issue of my mashgiach, who I know he is a super masmid. All this is on stolen time. As a friend of mine's father, who's Rosh Yeshiva, said, I owe my being a Rosh Yeshiva to no-dos, because he learned extra hours. He stole sleep. That's how he did it. Right? That's how I became Rosh Yeshiva on no-dos. That's what brought me to where I am. So in stolen time, then you have to be much more careful about the collateral damage. When it's exactly what you're doing, your main course, that's a different question. That's, each thing has to be figured out. Where does it fit into the holistic picture? That's okay. Shabbos.